Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. The Bank of Korea held its base rate steady at 2.5% today, extending a freeze that's now lasted 5 straight meetings. Governor Rhee Changyong pointed to renewed exchange rate volatility as a key reason, suggesting that FX dynamics, not just inflation, are increasingly shaping monetary policy. Meanwhile, President Rhee Changyong returned from a summit in Tokyo with Prime Minister Takaichi, where both sides emphasized cooperation on supply chains and reaffirmed Korea's push to join the CPTPP. But Japan has hinted that support may hinge on long-standing issues like seafood import restrictions. So what do these two latest developments on rates and regional trade tell us about where Korea is heading, both economically and strategically? For answers to this, we connect to Song Soo-young, Professor of Business and Economics at Chungang University. A big welcome, Professor Song.
Yeah, good evening too, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. And also joining us is Kim Mok-yeon, Associate Professor of Economics at Yonsei University. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
So, like I've said in our intro, the BOK froze the base rate at 2.5% today, and Governor Lee made it clear that the exchange rate was a key factor. So, Professor Song, how do you assess this latest decision, and does it mark a shift towards a more FX-sensitive policy stance, do you think?
Yeah, as the concern clearly shown in his the chairman of the Bank of Korea's remarks about the current economic situation, and he said, yes, the exchange rate is the foremost issues and the concern about the Korean economy right now. So far, we have witnessed some in the third quarter in 2025, we have been a little bit surprised growth of the economy, but that has been a little bit subdued for the fourth quarter and 0.6% or so. Overall, the economic growth rate achieved the level of 1% growth rate of GDP, but still we have a long way to go is because currently, as far as I know, the outbound investment, particularly the individuals and some financial investors would like to hold some the foreign assets, and that's why the Korean won has experienced such a steady depreciation over the past several months. So to that regard, well, later I'm going to talk about it, but recently some verbal intervention by the President has helped to relieve the burden. But clearly, this should be resolved, not within a short period, but relatively most of the Bank of Korea and the Korean government and some other national pension agent, they have to make efforts to stabilize the Korean won and dollar exchange rate.
Right, definitely. So markets could definitely read that as a shift towards a more FX-aware policy making in that regard. But the BOK cited exchange rate pressure largely from global drivers as a key reason for holding the rates. So, Professor Shim, to what extent is FX now becoming a primary constraint on monetary policy?
Yeah, I agree with the BOK that the downward pressure on the value of Korean won is really important. Even the BOK keeps the same rate again, although if it really concerns about that, maybe it has changed its stance on the monetary policy. The main purpose of the central bank is to keep low and stable inflation rate, and at the same time to manage people's perceptions on the future inflation rate. Other factors, such as the political concerns, are of the second-order importance to central banks, I think. In that sense, considering the possibility that the weak Korean won can further contribute to higher import price, which can pass through to the consumer price level in the short to medium run, seems to be really important at this point. Although the BOK itself cannot really change the trend of the exchange rate by itself, but taking this into account, I think it will be a really important factor behind the monetary policy decision. And if there's no significant actions taken by the government or the central bank, people will become more and more pessimistic about the inflation rate because at some point it will pass through to the usual price levels that we see every day. And losing the right timing to respond to such belief changes might result in large wealth loss in the future. And also, as the interest rate reversal between Korea and the US has been observed for more than a year, it also contributes to the current capital outflow and the Korean won. So I think at some point the BOK might change its stance on the monetary policy to deal with this kind of problem.
Right. It's also concerning for many of our public. And in fact, the fact that this time the rate freeze being held with a unanimous decision, 5 out of 6 members signal the rates are likely to stay at this level for the next 3 months. So how does that suggest that BOK has effectively closed the door for near-term easing, Professor Song?
I believe that the primary reason BOK is concerned about the exchange rate and the focus on the exchange rate stabilization is clearly linked with some issues of our Korean, South Korean investment in the U.S. We have pledged some $350 billion investment. Then if the exchange rate fluctuate too much and depreciate too much, it could turn out to be a really burden to our Korean economy. As far as that is why the government and the BOK has prioritized the stabilization of exchange rate, and also the Minister of Finance has paid a visit to Washington and induced his counterpart of Bessent has made some bubble intervention. But overall, the issue is about whether to this Korean situation is like a settle point, because if the exchange rate the Korean won is depreciated, it is favorable to for the exporting companies such as Samsung, Hyundai, whatever, and to avoid reduce the effect of the tariff. But however, on the other hand, this could be a really burden for the South Korean government to make an investment in the United States. And each year, the $200 billion will be installed and to pay $20 billion each year. So that is why we are, and not only Korea, but also the United States is also worried about the situation. So the best one is currently is a stabilization and make the minimum of some fluctuation of the exchange rate.
A very important point you're making. But let's widen the lens a little bit right now. President Lee just concluded his summit with the Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi in Tokyo, where both sides emphasized supply chain cooperation. Professor Shim, how significant is that element within Korea's broader economic security strategy?
Yeah, that is really, really important for South Korea. We already have an experience of supply chain disruption from rising political tension in 2019. Because of the rise political tension between Korea and Japan 6 years ago, Japanese government prohibited export of key semiconductor materials to Korea. Because the semiconductor industry plays a very important role in the Korean economy, it could have a negative impact on the Korean economy, although it turns out that such a tension did not significantly affect the Korean economy at that point. While it was not that significant at that point, if such a disruption occurs more frequently, it would have a very harmful effect on the Korean economy because it takes cost and time and a lot of effort to diversify the supply chain. And the massive supply chain disruption during the COVID-19 crisis also gives us the lesson that such a problem may really have large and persistent negative impacts on the macroeconomy. In addition, heightened geographical risk itself is usually found out to be negative impacts on the aggregate economy as well. And all this suggests that to keep stable and predictable relationship with other countries, including Japan and also China, is really crucial for South Korea.
So it's not really just short-term about trade, it's about long-term resilience as well. Now, building on that, the summit, it also touched on deeper regional integration, including Korea's bid to join the CPTPP, of course. Professor Song, what do you see as the strategic motivation behind this renewed push?
Let me go back several years when actually Japan has opposed Korean participation in CPTPP. And the primary reason is because of the Fukushima's seafood import is banned by Korea. And also Japan has started some kind of restriction on the export of three critical materials to South Korea, such as hydrogen fluoride and fluorine-based etching gas and photoresist. But South Korea has overcome that blockage of the supply of the important materials for semiconductor. So this kind of some geo-economic issue will come and from time to time. And in the year of 2026, particularly about the we need some recalibration of all the outlooks of the economic development. The reason is now the United States has become a kind of new kind of empire, and they do not refrain from showing their desire and aspiration to become some one top in the Western hemisphere. And that implies that multilateral trade and some kind of supply chain relationship could be very vulnerable in upcoming future. To that regards, we need to take some portfolio position, not only in diplomatics and but also in diplomacy but also in some geo-economic issues could be a really hot issue, and some multipolar position trade will become some continuous shape of the international trade. As a result, we need to not only participate in RCEP but also to make the most of the CPTPP, not just the supply chain, but also we need to have some export-import, and also we need to increase the domestic demand or consumption, and also. So this is the very important position, and even Joseph Stiglitz has offered an idea that against the United States, most of the world, the rest of the world should make a free trade and to isolate the U.S. So, but that is too extreme. But at least from South Korea's perspective, we need to make some very balancing position, and the settle point moment is coming.
Right, since a lot of changes are happening globally, so it's really time for South Korea to recalibrate. And a CPTPP push would be a good start for that. But Japan, from Japan, its support actually says that it has some strings attached, most notably the issue of Korean restrictions on Japanese seafood imports. So, Professor Shim, from an economic perspective, how much leverage does Tokyo really hold here, and what kind of cost-benefit balance is Seoul facing?
Yeah, the main leverage that Japan holds is that we need support of Japan to join the CPTPP. CPTPP requires a country that is willing to join it should receive support from all member countries. So if Japan is not willing to support Korea, South Korea would not be able to join it. So that's the leverage that Tokyo holds. And then we need to think about the benefit and the cost of joining the CPTPP for South Korea. In principle, it allows Korean firms to export their goods to the member countries at a lower rate. From the last year, as is pointed out well by Professor Song, trade uncertainty initiated from the US tariff shock and all the trade deals has become really an important issue for small open economies like Korea. the share of export in GDP exceeds 30% in Korea, and this figure clearly shows the need to join the trade deal like CPTPP to spur the economic growth. And the cause is that the average Koreans are reluctant to open seafood markets, especially after 2011, the earthquake in Japan, and the government might lose its part of popularity among Korean people because it might be critically related to people's concerns on their health.
Right. That really puts us all in a tricky position economically and politically, both. But beyond politics, let's talk about the core question that we're all curious about. So how much real economic value could CPTPP membership bring to South Korea, Professor Song?
Clearly, it has a very beneficial benefit is generated from some export market expansion for the export, because currently, even Korea is, Professor Shim has mentioned that it's smaller, open economy, but I don't think Korea is not anymore small, but relatively, this territory itself is small, but power and strength and economic capacity and technology innovation level has been already reached the highest level. And but here, CPTPP is the fourth largest some economic bloc left next to the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, and then European Union, and then the third one is RCEP. Now we have RCEP become effective in the year of 2022. Therefore, we could expand our market, export market, and also we could not only to the RCEPs, including the China and several less developed countries and developed countries. And also we need to, in addition, CPTPP itself is really beneficial to our Korea. And then what I would like to suggest is we must not ignore the India and Russia, because they could be a really very important our counterpart of trade, and then we could be positioned as a very balanced position. But it's very difficult to keep it because geoeconomic issues, the weaponization of rare earths or whatever the economic materials could be used as a weapon against to block and to cause harm and damage on the economy. So to that regard, we need to maintain a very cautious, but we need to make a progress in trade and also the domestic economic growth overall to help the overall Korean economy to thrive in the future.
Right. So speaking of progress, Professor Song, of course, joining the pact doesn't come without domestic consequences. So, what kind of policy changes from areas like agricultural, digital trade, or economical standards would Korea need to make to meet CPTPP commitments?
Me or
Professor Song?
Do you ask me? Yeah. Clearly, the agriculture and the issues and the fishery industry could be sacrificed. So, to that regards, the government be prepared to provide some subsidy or whatever the help, and also some upgrade of the fishery stocks and some agricultural stocks. For example, to make use of the AI device and some digital device to help grow the cultivation of the some fishes and in the ocean. So cultivating of the fisheries could be help reduce the cost and to expand our products to be sold in Japan and other countries. So that is clearly some difficulties for some agriculture and the fishery industry, but the government could help those industry people could overcome the difficulties in the when we participate in the CPTPP.
Right. So we're expecting some tough conversations ahead on that. So given all this political and economic hurdles ahead, Professor Shim, what do you think would be a realistic timeline for Korea's CPTPP accession?
Yeah, I think it will take several years, even when the will of the government to participate in CPTPP is strong. Most of all, as was pointed out earlier, it will clearly have a negative impact on the agricultural and related industry, which is the kind of the weakest part of our economy. Traditionally, it was really difficult for the government to persuade workers working in such an industry. If we look back, what was discussed during the trade deal with the US last year, whether the government will open more of the sectors was a really important issue. So I think it will take some time to persuade people to agree on joining CPTPP, although because it can have some negative impacts on some sectors and some people would be adversely affected. And the uncertain relationship between Korea and Japan might also prolong the process. Although the talk between President Lee and Prime Minister Takaichi seems to be successful at this point, we had a long experience that that kind of good atmosphere between the two countries changed dramatically after some dates. And because it is required to obtain all members' agreement on joining the treatment, keeping good relationship with Japan would be really important. So if we look, and also if we look back the historical episodes and data, it usually takes more than 2 years to make a FTA deal with the other countries, and I guess we can think of it as a kind of benchmark. So it takes at least 2 or more than 3 years.
Right, so we would have to be a little bit more patient on that, but thank you so much for giving us a big picture of the timeline. We'll have to leave our discussion right here tonight. Many thanks to Professor Song for your insights.
My pleasure.
And Professor Shim, of course, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.